Tell me what got done on all that dirt. Yo, if I were podcasting, it would be insane. Knowledge flowing like the sweetest rain. Professor Bear on the mic, spreading wisdom wide. A bear's thoughts, that's my pride, can't hide.
With the voices in your ear, changing the game.
If I rule podcasting, every thought we'd ignite. In a world of chatter, with a spark in the fight. With Professor Bear, we're climbing to new heights. A Bear's Thoughts podcast, shining bright in the night. Topics from the heart, never sounding the same. Got laughs and debates, never dull or bland. From culture to tech, take you by the hand. Join the ride with us, feel the vibe expand. With every episode, we shine that beginnings on the cusp. Not too old to adjust. Old dog, new tricks. Remember, I was just a pup. Something dirty in my cup. Clean soul. So tune in, don't miss what we got to share. If I rule podcasting, I spread the love everywhere.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I am Professor Bear, and this is A Bear's Thought. And guys, girls, 2026 has been already an amazing year. I've been blessed to talk to some of the wrestling community's great podcasters. And with that being said, I've had some people give me people to talk about and to meet. So this particular gentleman, which I think is amazing, he is actually wrote a book with Mark Merrow. Yes, you heard me correctly, Mark Merrow. And this gentleman has done some amazing work in podcasting. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Ben. Ben, how are you doing today, sir?
I am very well, thank you. First time I've ever been introduced by a professor, so that's exciting.
Oh, well, thank you. Before we get into the interview, I want to get your attention on the QR code. Now, if you've been following me all this year, you know I always put up a QR code for my guests so you can go and see their material and see how they do things. So make sure you check out his YouTube page. It is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal. Now, sir, as I always love to do, I always ask this first question of all of my guests. How did you become a wrestling fan?
So I became a wrestling fan in 1992, like so many of us here in the UK, because that was the year that the World Wrestling Federation reached its highest points with SummerSlam 92 at Wembley Stadium. So that was the year that me and so many of my friends really fell in love with wrestling. So the first match I ever saw was Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental title, and that's still three decades on is my favorite match of all time. So fell in love with wrestling at a very special time, and it's never left me, really. It's obviously ebbed and flowed at various points. There's been times when I've been more of a wrestling fan and less of a wrestling fan, but I've always been really fascinated by the stories behind wrestling and the people that make up wrestling, and that's really what Wrestling Life, my podcast, is all about.
And I was going to ask, well, let me ask this question first. How did you translate your love of wrestling to podcasting?
So I started a podcast in 2022, which wasn't a wrestling podcast. It's called Good Journeys. I still have that podcast going. And the idea of that podcast, because I've worked in PR for 20 years and I've always loved podcasts. So I decided to launch a podcast, which would be about inspiring people and their stories. One of the first people I had on the show was Nick Aldis. I've known Nick for quite a few years. We grew up in a very similar part of the UK at around about the same time. I knew him from his TNA days. That's when I'd last had a conversation with him. So I got in touch with Nick. This was before he joined WWE, and said, do you want to come onto my show? It's not really a wrestling show. We're going to talk all about your life, becoming a gladiator in the UK, and then falling in love with a wrestler in the US, but moving your entire life to the USA. And Nick was on the show for bless his heart. I think we talked for about 2.5 hours. That was when I didn't really understand that part of podcasting is actually being respectful of people's time and keeping it short. But from there, he introduced me to Matt Cardona, who also appeared on the show. Bronwyn Billington, who's a mutual friend of ours, she appeared on the show. Lillian Garcia appeared on the show. And before I knew it, this podcast, which wasn't supposed to be a wrestling podcast, was getting lots of wrestling people on it. And my wife said to me, you need to be really careful because you're not just speaking to wrestlers here. A lot of your audience won't necessarily want to hear these wrestling stories. And I thought there's something there, because I love doing this Good Journeys thing and I love learning about people's lessons and what they've learned from their lives. But I can't just speak to wrestlers all the time. I think maybe I should branch out and form another podcast. And so that's what I did in late 2023. I launched Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, and that is a standalone show all about wrestling, but specifically it's about people's lives, their mental health, well-being, the real side of what it takes to be a pro wrestler, with some match memories weaved in, but it's much more about actually trying to get to know the people behind the characters.
So with that being said, do you think that going down that road of getting more in depth of the person versus the character is a great way of standing out, being your podcast from other wrestling podcasts?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there's so many wrestling podcasts out there now, aren't there? But it's a bit like white noise, kind of. You launch and there's hundreds and hundreds of us, kind of all putting out content every week. So, it's a slight point of difference. I think there are other podcasts that also are interested in the stories behind. I think it's helped me in terms of getting some of the guests on that I've had on. Probably because I've asked them to come on for different reasons. Like for example, recording with Lillian Garcia, because I spoke to her about, we lost our fathers at a similar time. And so actually a lot of the reason for that conversation was to talk about grief and dementia and losing a parent and what that's like. I had Mick Foley on, and a lot of that was to talk about the work he's doing in Kenya with the Child Fund charity and why he's doing that. And I think, like when I had Buff Bagwell on earlier on, that was to talk about his sobriety journey. So I think people in the industry have quite liked the fact that I'm asking them to talk about their real lives as opposed to just recounting memories from matches. I mean, of course, I am a massive wrestling fan as well. So, if I get a Mick Foley on, of course, I'm going to ask him some questions about some of his matches. But what I'm trying to do is lead with maybe the aspect that they don't talk about quite so much, and show a different side. And I think that's what's translated into writing books with wrestlers now, is because I really love learning. I'm just as interested in their childhoods and their upbringings and everything that goes on outside of wrestling as I am what they did in front of television cameras.
That is really interesting. And again, I think it definitely sets you apart from, dare I say, most podcasters. I like the human element in yours, because a lot of times we as wrestling fans tend to forget that these people are human. They go through things um, easily. They have lost in different things. They don't get to see their family traveling abroad and everything. With that, who would you say has been your biggest guest as far as the conversation that y'all had? It was like really amazing for you.
Lex Luger. I was so grateful to have Lex on the show. Lex, I think, is just one of the most incredible people I've ever met inside of wrestling or out. I've had a few conversations with Lex before his Hall of Fame induction last year, and just his outlook on life, having literally lost everything, and he's just such a humble, kind, gentle person compared to the kind of Lex Luger that we knew in wrestling in the mid 90s. It's like night and day. And I loved, yeah, I loved recording with Lex. He's got a heart of gold.
I It's funny that you mentioned Lex and him be uh your your number one, because as a kid I was a humongous Lex Luger fan. And I think of Lex as the greatest United States champion of all time. But I the one thing that I really admire about Lex is he's owned up to everything.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't tried to make an excuse for it. He doesn't shy away from having those tough conversations. And sometimes some people do not realize that it is a blessing to lose everything to gain the main thing.
Yep.
And, and for Lex, I think that, like you said, he's just a great example of no matter what happens, he is still grateful for
Yeah,
everything.
he is. And that whole group really of friends between Lex Luger, Mark Mero, DDP. I had Raven on the show recently. He's another one who I think is at this stage of his life and with his health is just really appreciating the career he had and the lives he touched. There's so many. The main thing I've really kind of seen over the last few years of doing this show is so many of these wrestlers I think they're very grateful that actually there's so many of us that still love and appreciate their work. I mean, I'm particularly interested in speaking to kind of legends from the 80s and 90s. So even if you're looking at 1996 now, that's 30 years ago, which I find incredible. But this is a long time, and we kind of forget this because as wrestling fans and podcasters, you can watch a show from 1993 and it just takes you back to being a kid. But that's 30, 35 years ago. So a lot of these guys, I think, are actually they really appreciate it when someone takes a genuine interest and is genuinely a fan of their work. I've been blessed to record a couple of times with Demolition now, which I recorded with them again the other night. I inducted them into I've got my own Wrestling Life Hall of Fame, and I inducted them into that. And I said at the start, I said this is as surreal as it was the first time, but I'm joined by Axe and Smash of Demolition. Because the 8-year-old me is thinking, how on earth have I got Demolition on my show? I think it's a real, we're very blessed as podcasters. There's a huge amount of work that goes into this, as you well know, and there's a lot of admin that goes into podcasting, but we get to have some, remarkable conversations. What would you say has been do you have a favorite guest from your years of doing this?
I would say the best podcast that I did, even though in the beginning I flubbed his name and I had to apologize to him and tell him there are times I've been nervous, but I had not been so much as nervous with this particular guest. Robert Fuller.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay.
We got to talk about his family history and I was able to tell him how much he touched not just only me, but my family and help. And he would never know how much he helped me become the podcaster I am today because of him and his family's wrestling. And it, like you, the little kid in me was just, oh God, oh God. And I've been blessed to talk to a few legends, and I have to keep reminding myself this is real. I can pick up my phone and text Ricky Morton and have just a regular conversation with him.
Yeah.
Never would I have imagined that. Never imagined being able to call Ahmed Johnson my friend. So as like it is amazing. It's an amazing journey. I mix in legends, indie people that are just starting out because I feel like I have a voice. I want to give them a voice, give them a chance
Yes.
to grow and to become the next legend in wrestling. So I feel like I am purposely here to give appreciations and flowers to people.
Yeah, and that's a really big focus of what I'm trying to do with Wrestling Life going into this year is I want to have many more indie wrestlers, especially British indie wrestlers on the scene who maybe don't get the same level of exposure as over in the States. So try and provide more opportunities for British wrestlers to talk about their journeys. I've had a few on so far, but I'd like to really kind of open the doors to more indie wrestlers. Just to kind of get that kind of different perspective, which I think is quite a perspective that maybe a lot of podcasts don't go into as well, because so many of the podcasts that interview wrestlers are stateside. So I do feel there's a bit of a responsibility I've got as a British wrestling podcaster to try and showcase a few more talents from this side of the Atlantic as well.
And I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. You are the third UK podcaster that I've talked to, and I did not ask either one of my previous guests this question, which I feel like it must have been just a slip of a mind because we had great conversations. But do you think it's easier to be a podcaster and get a lot more interviews from being in the UK versus what you see in the US?
Probably not, because I think the time difference works against us. Unless you're willing to podcast in the middle of the night. I podcast around having young children and working full time. So I tend to, record mid-afternoon Eastern time, which generally seems to work. But again, it's like one of those constraints. I don't know, in all honesty. I mean, I obviously get far less opportunities to do in-person interviews, which is what I'd love to do. I got to do a couple last year. I got to do an hour or so with Mike Chioda, who was over for a convention, and we went to London and met up. And then bizarrely, I had Kurt Fuller, who was the star of No Holds Barred and Ghostbusters too. I don't know if you remember Kurt Fuller, but he was Brel in No Holds Barred. And we discovered we lived near one another in the UK. So I was able to go to his house and do an interview of him. And those in-person interviews are amazing. They're so much better than this. But obviously my opportunities to do that in the UK are quite limited. Honestly, I don't know. I always introduce myself as I'm a UK-based podcaster when I get in touch with people. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But there's certainly fewer of us. Does that mean that there's still a huge amount of UK wrestling podcasts out there, and some very, very big and successful ones? But there aren't that many who are doing weekly interviews. A lot more of them are based on talking about the current product, analysing what's happening in WWE today. I don't really do much of that, partly because I barely watch any wrestling anymore. Is the irony of this is the last 3 years of doing this podcast is the least wrestling I've ever watched. So, I don't have time. I just don't have the time. And I don't really have the energy because I'm pouring my energy into either researching guests or interviewing guests or, getting the show out there and marketing it or writing books. And I haven't really got time to watch 5 hours of Raw and SmackDown a week.
No, I definitely understand. I think if people really knew what time and energy we put into podcasting and scheduling guests, like one of my blessings and curse is I'm disabled. So I don't have a job. So I have time to do different things that the normal podcaster don't. And my style of podcasting is a little different than a lot of podcasters, where a lot of people do the research and go in their backgrounds and stuff. I don't do it for the fact I like to know when when my fans learn about it. And for some reason, I feel like if I fake something or reaction, my fans would know and wouldn't appreciate that. So that's just
I
my
like that.
take on
And it is harder and harder when so many of the guests I've interviewed have done so many podcasts over the years. I mean, obviously shoot interviews have been around forever now, haven't they? And, there's between, brilliant, shows like, Sam Roberts and Ariel Helwani and Chris Van Vliet, like, pretty much all of the big wrestlers at one point or another, bar Sting, have done these interviews really. And so, you're going to be asking them things that they've already been asked countless times, and you might even know the answer to that. And you have to kind of try and find a fresh way of asking something they've already responded to before. I find that usually if I'm building that in towards the end of the interview, it's okay because you've built up some rapport with the person and you're kind of getting on with them, and then it's okay to ask them, tell me about that WrestleMania match or what it was like to win the title here or whatever it may be. But that they've answered that question a lot, and you as you rightly say, you might already know the answer, and then you have to feign surprise at it. And the authentic moments are far better. And I love it when I discover something in a conversation that I've never heard them say before. That's amazing.
Yes, definitely. Who is your big goal right now to get to interview? Let me rephrase it. Who would you like to interview, dead or alive, and why?
Oh, dead or alive? Gosh, that's a tough one. I would have loved to have had Hulk Hogan on the show. I would have loved to have had a look to try and have a really open conversation with Hulk Hogan about his experiences as Terry Bollea. I would have liked to have tried to have a conversation to see if I could slightly go beyond the character and the persona, because I've heard so many things over the years from so many different people about. There's a lot of people say he was a fantastic person. There's a lot of people who don't agree with that. I would have liked to have had a very open conversation with him and just see what happened really. And I was starting to inch towards that, it looked like last year, via a few connections, because as you well know, it's this industry is all about trust, isn't it? And people recommending you, and a few people have recommended me to him, and I was hopeful it could happen at some point, or possibly around the Real American Freestyle launch that might have opened the doors to being a bit more open to media. So Hulk Hogan. Another person I would have loved to have interviewed is Sid. I grew up loving Sid Justice, loved the Psycho Sid character. He's someone again who just tremendous character, tremendous presence, and I think that would have been a fantastic conversation. But one thing that I launched on the channel last year is a Gone Too Soon series where we're paying tribute to a lot of the legends that have passed away with special episodes, because launching a show in 2023, sadly, so many of the people I would have loved to have interviewed have died. And if I'd started doing this 15 years earlier, if podcasting had been a thing 15 years earlier properly, to have had the chance to have maybe interviewed like a Roddy Piper, or, in the past, an Eddie Guerrero, or, there's so many incredible legends that we've lost as wrestling fans. I mean, people who are still alive, I would probably top three people for me would be, and this is purely fandom really, but Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and Bret Hart, because they're kind of my three goats really as a wrestling fan. So getting a chance to speak to any of them would be great. But to be honest, having done as many of these interviews as I've done now, much like you, I'm just really interested in the conversation and the person. And I found every single person, even some wrestlers who I haven't known much about before I've started my research, have taught me so much, and I've learned so much from them. So I started off with a dream guest list when I launched Good Journeys, and that included Mick Foley and Lex Luger and Kurt Angle, and I've interviewed the three of them. So you kind of never know, as you say about like having Ahmed Johnson as your friend, you never really know who you're going to connect to within wrestling. All I've learned is it's a really, really small world. It's a world built on trust, and it's a world built on reputation. So all I'm kind of trying to do, one episode at a time, one conversation at a time, is just give that guest a really good experience, and hope. I usually say to people afterwards, I say, if you can recommend me to someone, I'd be really grateful. I don't ask who. I don't say, I know that you know this person, can you put in a word? I just say, if you can recommend me to someone who you think would enjoy my interviewing style, then please do. And that seems to have worked quite well so far.
I totally agree with you. Being able to interview Ricky Morton, where Ricky Morton does not do a lot of podcasting, was a very great honor. And seeing Ricky out at events, and he's telling other wrestlers, hey, give me your number. You want a great interview? This is who you need to go. You need to
amazing
profile out, go to him. And that just makes me feel so appreciative that he feels that I'm that type of podcaster. And it lets me know that like you said, the conversation, I try to make everybody feel welcome. We joke around. I always ask pre-hand, what do you want to talk about and what do you not want to talk about? I'm not trying to get you on here to embarrass you or grill you to put that. I want this to be like two old friends having a conversation
around a campfire with marshmallows.
Hey, if you can't get behind marshmallows, I don't know. I just don't know.
Absolutely, I agree. I can't connect. But no, I mean, you've got a very relaxing style about you, and this is all it is. At the end of the day, it's two people having a conversation. I think because there are so many podcasters out there now, podcast has potentially got itself a bad name. Really, it's just a conversation. Do you want to join me online for an hour to talk some wrestling? Is really what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. And for me too, and especially for this month being an appreciation, I truly want people to see that podcasters, just because we're podcasters trying to do similar things, do not mean we can't enjoy each other, recommend each other, to do things together, to collaborate, to make something better for everyone. And I'm a big firm believer in giving flowers, because I've lost so many different people in my life. And I thought to myself, I refuse to lose anyone else without letting them know how I feel and what they mean to me in my life. So I try to make sure when I have guests is to give you your flowers so you can enjoy them and understand that not only your fans, but my fans and myself enjoy you and appreciate what you do for wrestling, because we play an important part, as it took me a while to understand. So for me, I want to give you your flowers and thank you for everything that you're doing, everything that you're done, and everything you will do in the future.
Thank you. That's very kind. And likewise, yeah. I mean, wrestling is entirely built on fans. I mean, you only have to go back to 2020 and 2021 to see what wrestling is without fans. It needs every voice. It needs all these different people from all parts of the world. And some people love some people hate other people, but it's a hugely passionate world, and I love that passion. Nothing brings me greater joy than kind of seeing the YouTube comments that come in on videos, and sometimes seeing people kind of spark off against one another, or seeing people like dispute, oh, I don't know about that, or I don't know. It's like, it's great because we're all just we're so passionate and we're so in love with wrestling, to the point that sometimes we lose sight of the fact, I think, that it's supposed to be fun. And I think with my conversations, I've just tried to kind of focus on the fun bits, really, which is having conversations with people who I massively admire. And a lot of them I've got Hasbro figures of behind me. And, I played with those figures when I was a little kid. And it's a privilege to get to do this. And it's lovely to get a chance to speak to people like you as well.
I definitely appreciate that. And I know we're on the time frame, so I will let you go. But before I let you go,
Yes.
would you, well, no, not would you, will you put out any social medias you want to plug, anyone you would like to um, give a shout out to? The floor is yours, sir.
Oh, thank you. Well, I guess the main thing is my show is all social media. It's at Wrestling Life Online is the handle, and it's Wrestling Life Online, Wrestling Life with Ben Veal on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I guess my only plug really is the book that you mentioned at the start. So that's Mark Mero, Bad to Good: The Inspiring Story of a Wrestling Wild Man. That came about. Mark was a guest on my show, one of the earliest guests on the show back in 2023. And it was just one of those kind of 40-minute conversations, asking the usual questions. And within 10 minutes of talking to him, I was just so blown away by his humility. And as you said with Lex Luger, like, Mark Mero just completely owns his mistakes. He is incredibly open about things that he's done wrong and things he wishes had done differently, but he also doesn't have any regrets, because he often talks about how if it changed anything, he wouldn't be where he is right now.
Amen.
But we were speaking, we spoke very candidly. I got on so well with him. I jumped out of my comfort zone afterwards and messaged him and said, I want to have another conversation off air. I want to talk to you about a project. And in that project, I said, look, I really want to write your life story. Can we work together on it? And that was the start of an incredible year-long journey working with Mark, and a very special book, a book that when I started to reach out to people within the industry and said, I'm working on a book, Mark Mero's life story, would you mind giving up a few minutes to talk to me? Absolutely no one said no. Before I knew it, I had DDP and I had Lex Luger and Eric Bischoff and Mark Mero and Justin Roberts and all these guys from the industry. Vince Russo kind of came out to say, absolutely, if it's for Mark, we'll do anything. He's got a heart of gold. He's very respected within the industry, and in my biased opinion, he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. But it's a blessing to write his book, and the book was released last year. It's on Amazon, and hopefully some of your awesome fans can check it out, because it's a book that is way beyond wrestling, really. It's a really inspiring comeback story of someone who genuinely hit rock bottom, or as Mark says, he hit rock bottom's basement, and he came out the other side, and his life after wrestling, I think, is even more impressive than what he did in wrestling. So that's my main plug.
Well, definitely appreciate that. And that will make me do some research to get the book and read the book and see more of the side of Mark Merrill I didn't know about. So,
well, there's a lot of fun.
that.
There's a lot of fun WCW memories in there as well. A lot of good Johnny B. Bad stuff in there, which is a lot of fun. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff about Sable and everything that happened towards the end of WWF. There was and he's very open. We talk about the affair with Brock Lesnar. It's all in there. He's a really open book. What he doesn't do is he's not critical of people. I think that's a great thing. That's why I loved working on this book with Mark. It's not a book where he's burying lots of people. That's not my style. That's not his style. He's very respectful, but he does tell it like it is. And and then I'm working on 2 other wrestling memoirs now. So one is with Doug Williams, British wrestling legend, and the other is with Mark Kapani, who was Muhammad Hassan in WWE. So both of those books should be out by the end of this year, published by Wrestling Life. And similarly, looking at 2 very different people to Mark, but people that have had very interesting stories within the world of wrestling. So keeping busy, keeping immersed in the world of wrestling.
Well, I am so glad to hear about that. Of course, we hope for your success in those books also. You have an open invitation. Anytime you would like to come on my show again, I would be more than happy to have you on.
Oh, thank you. I've loved this today. So we're only short of time constraints because I've got a young child to put to bed who is waiting for his story. But I would love to come back maybe later this year when one of the next books are out and have a bit of talk about the experience.
That will be no problem. We would definitely work it out.
And I want to say thank you to Bronwyn Billington for connecting us as well.
Oh yes, thank you. You already know how much of a sweetheart you are, but every chance I get, I am gonna keep continuing saying you're a sweetheart, and I appreciate everything you have done for me. Thank you so much.
One of the coolest things I got to do is induct her legendary father into the Wrestling Life Hall of Fame last year. So Bronwyn and her mother Michelle joined me for an induction episode, and Bronwyn's got a campaign out right now, an online campaign to get the Dynamite Kid into the WWE Hall of Fame. So I would encourage everyone to sign that, and let's get the other half of British Bulldogs into the WWE Hall of Fame sometime soon as well.
Yes, we have it actually on our Facebook page. We've been promoting it, and we're gonna get it up on our wrestling. Oh goodness, I blanked out. Our wrestling website. That's the word I'm looking for. Website. So, yes, we definitely want him in the Hall of Fame.
I'm sure it will happen one day.
Yes. So again, thank you so much. Guys, girls, thank you so much for coming and sitting around the campfire to hear another amazing story from a podcaster's perspective. There are so many great podcasters out there. I encourage you to do your research and go find. I know Professor Bear is great, but there are more great podcasters out there. So please keep an open mind and do that. With that said, continue to support your local indie wrestling. I can't encourage you enough, because you never know who you will see at the beginning of their journey and get to see, hopefully, them make it to the big time and maybe the WWF World Champion, AEW. But again, follow their journey and support them. With that being said, I am Professor Bear. This has been a Bear's Thought, and we'll see you next time around the campfire. Y'all take care.